Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're looking at a case that's both really interesting and really sad. The death of Praine Varagis. So Praine was a college student who went missing after being at a party. And the investigation into what happened left everyone with more questions than answers, really.
Yeah, this is one of those cases that just shows how hard it can be to find out the truth,
Yeah.
especially when you have all these conflicting stories and potential biases in the mix.
Right. And to kind of unpack all of that, we're going to be looking closely at a Crime Junkie podcast episode, the episode that covered Praveen's story. And it's a really powerful episode because we hear directly from Praveen's mother, Lovely.
Hearing that firsthand account really makes it hit home. It reminds us that there are real people behind these stories and the court cases.
For sure. So let's go back to the beginning and try to retrace the steps of what happened. It's February 13th, 2014, and Praveen's cousin Ashley starts to get worried because she hasn't seen him. Praveen had been at a party the night before, missed his class that day, and his phone was going straight to voicemail. Ashley's concern grows, and she ultimately decides to report him missing to the police.
It's good that she acted quickly. Those early stages in a missing persons case are so important.
Absolutely. Now imagine you're Praveen's parents, Lovely and Matthew, back in Chicago, hundreds of miles away. They get this call from the Carbondale police that their son is missing. Lovely later said that she just had this uneasy feeling all day, like a mother's intuition.
Wow, yeah, there really is something to that, isn't there?
Yeah. Praveen's parents immediately start driving to Carbondale. And with each unanswered call to their son's voicemail, their hearts are just sinking further. And when they arrive, they're met with this really frustrating and dismissive response from the Carbondale police. They're told college kids do this, as if their concern is unwarranted. And to make matters worse, the search for Praveen is called off way too early.
Oh, wow, that's awful. It makes you wonder about how these missing persons cases are handled by law enforcement, especially when they're making assumptions about someone because of their age or, their lifestyle.
Yeah, and thankfully the Illinois Lieutenant Governor Sheila Simon steps in.
Yeah.
And she makes sure that the search continues.
It's amazing what one person can do when they stand up for what's right.
It really is.
Yeah.
And Lovely never gave up hope. Even when things were looking bleak, she even had this dream about Praveen being pushed out of a vehicle.
Really?
It's kind of creepy, and it makes you wonder if it was some sort of premonition.
Or was it her anxieties coming out?
Yeah, maybe. And then things take a dramatic turn. On February 18th, Praveen's body is found in a wooded area just 400 yards from the hotel where his family was staying.
Wow, so close.
I know.
That's both chilling and heartbreaking at the same time. Makes you think, what if they'd searched more thoroughly earlier on?
Right. The initial theory from the police was that Praveen was drunk after the party, got into an argument with a friend who gave him a ride, ran into the woods, and died from hypothermia.
Like an open and shut case.
Right.
Hmm.
But Lovely wanted to see her son one last time. And what she saw when she viewed his body made her question everything. There were bruises on Praveen's forehead, injuries that didn't fit with just dying from hypothermia. And her question, who beat my kid, became this driving force behind her search for the truth.
A mother's instinct.
Exactly. And when the autopsy reports came back, they just added more fuel to the fire. The first autopsy by Dr. James Michael Jacoby said that the cause of death was hypothermia, and the bruises were from environmental factors. But then a second autopsy, commissioned by Lovely and done by Dr. Varagis, painted a very different picture.
So 2 autopsies, 2 completely different findings. That's a huge turning point in the case.
Totally. Dr. Varagis concluded that Praveen actually died from blunt force trauma to the head, which points to a possible homicide. He also noted this deep bruise on Praveen's arm that could have been a defensive wound.
Like he was trying to fight back.
Right. And to complicate things even more, both toxicology reports found no drugs or alcohol in Praveen's system.
So that throws out that whole theory that he was drunk, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to Gage Bthoon. He was the friend who gave Praveen a ride that night. And his stories about what happened were inconsistent and changed multiple times.
Red flag right there.
Yeah. So at first, Gage said he picked up a black hitchhiker who tried to rob him, but that story was later debunked. Then he admitted to fighting with Praveen, but even that story changed over time.
It's like he's trying to make up a story to fit what the police know.
Yeah. And he also made some racially charged comments about Praveen during police interviews.
Oh, no. That just brings in a whole other layer of problems. It makes you think about how bias can really affect things.
Absolutely. The investigation seemed to hit a wall for a while, but Praveen's family and their supporters didn't give up. Lovely and Monica Zukas, a local radio show host, formed the Praveen Action Council and worked to get a more thorough investigation.
That's what I'm talking about, the power of community.
Totally. And their work led to the appointment of a special prosecutor, David Robinson. And he took a fresh look at the case. And after a year of working on it, Robinson was able to get a grand jury indictment against Gage for first-degree felony murder in 2017.
Wow, so they finally got him.
It seemed like it.
Justice was finally going to be served.
It really did. But then there was this crazy twist. The judge presiding over the trial overturned the guilty verdict because of a technicality with how the indictment was worded.
Are you serious? After all that work?
I know. So despite the jury's decision, Gage was a free man.
It's hard to believe that something like a technicality could outweigh, the truth.
It is. And Lovely has said that she thinks racial bias played a role in the judge's decision. She asks, what was the interest in protecting that boy over my son?
It makes you wonder.
This case has so many unanswered questions. Like, whose shoes were found near Praine's body? And where are his actual shoes, the purple ones he was wearing to the party? What actually happened in Gage's truck that night?
It's like key pieces of the puzzle are still missing.
Exactly.
Ah.
And Lovely believes that, based on the evidence, Praine was actually attacked twice, which makes sense given the different stages of healing of his injuries.
So there's more to the story than what we know.
Right. But despite all the setbacks, the fight for justice for Praine is still going on. They're trying to bring the case to the Supreme Court.
Wow, it's inspiring how they haven't given up.
Praine's case has caused some much-needed change in the Carbondale community. Law enforcement has reevaluated how they approach cases like this. And there's more awareness now of how bias can impact things.
That's good to hear. Praine's story really shows that we need to fight for what's right, even when it's hard.
It does. And we all need to question assumptions and demand accountability from those in power.
It's about never giving up on the truth. It really is amazing how, even with something so tragic, you can still have positive change come out of it.
Yeah, it shows that we can always learn and grow, even from difficult situations. And speaking of learning more, what about those shoes that were found near Praine's body? They didn't belong to him, so where did they come from?
Yeah.
And what happened to Praine's shoes, the purple ones he was wearing that night? They were never found.
It's so strange, right? Makes you wonder if they could be a big clue that everyone missed. Maybe they belong to someone else who was there that night. Someone we don't even know about.
Yeah, like a missing piece of the puzzle. Until those shoes turn up, we might never have all the answers.
Exactly. It just goes to show how important it is to pay attention to all the details in an investigation. Sometimes the smallest things can end up being the most important.
Okay, so we have these missing shoes and the conflicting autopsy reports and a witness whose story keeps changing. It's all very suspicious. So what's the takeaway from all of this? What does this deep dive into Praine's case tell us?
Well, for me, it's a reminder that we can't just accept the first explanation we get. We need to keep asking questions, looking for things that don't add up, and demanding answers, especially when the evidence doesn't make sense.
Like with this case, the police were so quick to write Praine off as just a college kid messing around. But if they'd looked into things more carefully, maybe things would be different now.
And it also shows us how bias can be present, even in places where we expect fairness. We need to be aware of our own biases and call out bias in others, especially people in positions of authority.
Praine's mother, Lovely, is so inspiring. She never stopped fighting for her son. Even with all the challenges she faced, her strength is just amazing.
She's such a great example of what it means to stand up for justice. She didn't let the system silence her. And her actions have led to real change.
Absolutely. And she was so brave to share those pictures of Praine's injuries. It really showed everyone the truth about what happened.
Those photos are powerful. They challenge anyone who tries to deny the violence that Praine suffered.
This whole experience has been really eye-opening. I think it's made me realize that we all need to be involved in seeking truth and justice. It's not enough to just sit back and watch.
I agree completely. Praine's story is a call to action. It reminds us to speak up for those who are treated unfairly, challenge systems that are unjust, and never stop demanding accountability.
And what about all those unanswered questions in this case? Do you think we'll ever get the full story of what happened to Praine?
It's hard to say, but the fact that people are trying to bring the case to the Supreme Court gives me some hope. Maybe someone will take a fresh look at all the evidence and we can finally get the truth.
I hope so. Justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
And Praine deserves to have his story told and understood.
He does. His story has touched so many people and inspired a movement. His legacy will live on.
This has been a really insightful conversation. I'm feeling a lot of things: sadness for Praine and his family, anger at the injustice of it all, but also a sense of hope that we can learn from this and make things better.
I feel the same way. Praine's story is a reminder that there's still so much work to do. To create a world that's more just and fair for everyone, we owe it to Praine and to everyone who's been treated unjustly to keep fighting for change.
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot to process. But it's important to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Cases like this really show us where the problems are and what needs to change.
Absolutely. And you know what's remarkable? Even with all the setbacks and the unfairness of it all, there's still this sense of hope around Praine's case. The fact that his story has resonated with so many people and sparked all this activism, it shows what we can do when we come together.
That's true. And speaking of taking action, there's that petition going around to try to get Praine's case to the Supreme Court. Do you think that could actually work?
Well, it's a long shot for sure. But sometimes all it takes is one judge to see things differently, to look at the injustice and say, this isn't right.
Yeah, that would be amazing. It could change how these kinds of cases are dealt with in the future.
It would send a message that every life matters, that justice shouldn't depend on your race or your social status. And even if the Supreme Court doesn't take the case, just having the petition out there keeps people talking about Praine's story. It keeps the attention on this issue.
Right. Keeping the conversation going is so important. And for anyone listening who wants to know more about Praine's case, we'll include links to the petition and some other resources in our show notes.
You know those photos of Praine's injuries that Lovely shared? I think everyone should see them. They're a powerful reminder of what he went through. And they show why we need to find out the truth in this case.
It's crazy to think that it's been so many years since Praine died, and we still don't have all the answers. But his story has really touched a lot of people, and it's inspired a movement for justice that's not going away.
His legacy is going to live on, in the hearts of those who loved him and in the fight to make sure this never happens again.
This deep dive has been really insightful, but it's also been hard emotionally. I feel sadness for Praine and his family, and anger at the injustice. But I also feel hopeful that by talking about cases like this, we can move towards a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, a world where justice actually wins.
I couldn't agree more. It's been great discussing this case with you today. Let's keep learning, keep speaking up, and keep working for a better world.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll be back next week with another deep dive. Until then, stay curious and stay engaged.